How's it going, Ray? Nice to meet you.
Very well. Very
Thanks
well.
for
Great
thanks for
introduction.
taking the time to chat with us about this stuff. I'm really excited to hear what side of these different paths you're going to lead us down, and then maybe we'll make some decisions on where we think which path that we're going to go down.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I want to do is just get us having better conversations more than today. While I do have a point of view, it's really more about how do we approach the chaotic diversity of points of view in this space. And as you mentioned, I'm currently chief architect at All Hands AI. We have a coding agent called Open Hands, which actually this week was just shot back to the top of the SWE-bench verified leaderboard and is the only open source agent in the top 10. But I'm here today to talk about something different. And as I was putting this together, I realized this is not even an AI talk. And this is perhaps not really a programming talk either. This is a talk about empathy, and this is a talk about listening to each other. But if that sounds uncomfortable, then don't worry, because we will have AI and programming in the, as a backdrop, a nice, comfy backdrop for these concepts. And let's start a little bit with where I felt I was coming from. This is a day in the life of an AI skeptic. Someone will say something very provocative publicly, like recently you might have seen the Anthropic CEO's remarks on many different topics, many different professions. One quote that we saw a lot was, in 12 months we may be in a world where AI is writing essentially all the code. I think we've got 10 months remaining on the clock there. So when we hear things like this, we have questions. I would definitely encourage you to check out Cal Forster's talk on this track as well about, the other 70% of engineering, because those of us who have, been in the field are aware that just writing essentially all the code isn't the entirety of the job. There's a lot of different room for interpretation here, but regardless, we hear things like this, we have questions. I posed a particular kind of playful challenge about, okay, if we can do all the code, can we kill one mainframe? Can we replace the code in just a single mainframe? Half of the US GDP is still tied up in companies that use mainframes in some capacity. Really, the specifics of my challenge are not really important. Just for the last 2 years, what I have been repeatedly saying is that language models break old code. I've been saying that in every way I know how and testing that assumption and trying to find ways around it. I see this as the central problem we have to tackle bringing AI into software development, is that code needs to continue to develop. Develop as a synonym for change. We can't just be thinking about, can we make some new prototype? What are we going to do with something that already exists? And when I bring up what I see are pretty basic facts and questions in that regard, all sorts of things are hurled at me. I am called a Luddite. I'm told I have my head in the sand. I'm told I'm missing the big picture. And at this point, I literally work on coding agents full time. So if I'm a Luddite, I don't know what you want from us, but and in particular, in response to the last post, mostly positive feedback, but one person, the full quote was, missing the big picture so badly that it physically hurts them to read my post. It doesn't feel great to be talked to in this way. You perhaps have also seen this one, maybe many hundreds of times, the phrase, you'll be left behind if you don't, subscribe to their newsletter or use their preferred type of tool or whatever it might be. You're going to be left behind. I mean, this is language that is better suited for an apocalyptic religious prophecy in the form of a B-movie series featuring Kirk Cameron than some kind of nuanced technical discussion. I don't like telling people they're going to be left behind. I also saw this phrase said with more or less a straight face, resistance is futile, said by someone with some really respectable accomplishments, someone whose work that I admire and might even be one of the speakers at this event. I'm not sure. I don't know what to do with this when I see things like this. I mean, for all the money in the bank, you might recall who said resistance is futile. Who is being quoted here? Was it said by the heroes of that story? I mean, no, it was said by the Borg, one of the most notorious villains in the history of science fiction. If we find ourselves quoting them in earnest, are we really on the right side? Jean-Luc Picard would never say resistance is futile. He only said that as Locutus when the AI was controlling his brain. And in the story, resistance wasn't futile at all. They did resist and they were successful. Jean-Luc Picard would say, if you are on the side of truth, resist to the last breath. But okay, we need to breathe. I need to slow down. I'm just responding to emotionally charged rhetoric with other emotionally charged rhetoric. And before I know it, it's 9 a.m. and I'm already worked up on LinkedIn. I chose to become involved in this dialogue. I believed that I had some insight as a legacy code expert. And if I'm going to make any headway in that dialogue, I need to be able to engage with people who think about things somewhat differently than I do. They also believe they're in the right. They also mean well. They have a different view based on their own reflection of the answers to certain questions, and they're maybe trying to warn against some things as well. So what are we even talking about? It all hinges on, just sort of different answers we've come up with to this fundamental question that's all brought us here together to have these awesome discussions. What is the future of software in light of the AI changes recently, in light of a lot of other pieces on the board? So in service of that dialogue, I have found that it's really helpful to just lay out what the viewpoints are that we see people clustering around. And then we can identify, okay, well, you're in that camp over here. That's why you're saying things that are so different to what I think here. And we can start to untangle things. So I'm going to name these scenarios first, and then we'll get into all of them. And perhaps you'll have different names for some of these, but I'm calling them these. 1 is extreme completion. 2 is the devocalypse. 3 is abstraction leap. 4 is uncharted waters. 5 is the review economy. 6 is the infinite pile of garbage. So perhaps the most conservative, uncontroversial outcome here is the extreme completion, because it has already happened to a fairly significant degree. This is things like your coding assistants that appear in IDEs and editors. And more recently, you've had the coding agents, which have a little more autonomy, but basically is bound to completing your immediate thought on a tactical level. And they're operated by programmers. The AI does the typing, but ultimately, if this is all that happens, our job doesn't fundamentally change. You still need a great deal of coding expertise to use these in a sustainable way on an existing code base. A great convenience, but ultimately not a game changer to the degree that many people think we can achieve. This is an example of it. This is the cursor editor. It's quite popular. And here I am doing some autocomplete action on some Haskell code where I've got one function that already exists, and I would like to make another one, clean prime prime, that will remove both leading and trailing spaces. Sure enough, with the help of Claude Sonnet, it plops that out. It is perfectly serviceable code, but I'm, making a suggestion at a pretty small micro level in order to do that. The reason, by the way, that I'm using an example in the programming language Haskell is because it has very advanced type checking. And I think type theory is a very rich area to provide checks that form kind of a counterbalance against the non-deterministic nature of language model output. So that's food for thought. But Then we have more agentic examples, and there are a number of these. The one I happen to work on is OpenHands, and this is something I did just yesterday, where we do this with just routine tasks, and this is just a new way of interacting with it. It's a Slack chat integration that's experimental, and I said, hey, we recently had to update this log statement in this particular way. There are probably others in the code base that need to be updated in that same way. Can you go make a PR that does that? Comes back a few minutes later with a whole 48 file pull request for me to look at. That's even going to the extent of like, it wrote scripts on its own to help it find the cases it needed to change. Very interesting stuff. I mean, this is nuts if you showed this to me a couple of years ago. And albeit it's a small kind of tactical request, but even to be able to have this kind of all-purpose tech debt dirt shoveler, really cool. And there are multiple agents that can take on in a code base of this size, about 100,000 lines, tasks even more sophisticated than this. This is fairly low ball for what it could do. Again, that's all, though, in the extreme completion camp. I argue that would not fundamentally change the world of software development. It would be a great convenience and is worth doing. A more extreme point of view is the devocalypse. Now, when some of us get in these contentious arguments, I think it is often on one side or the other are believers in the devocalypse, the developer apocalypse. So there is no longer anything really even resembling the role of a software engineer as we see it today, or it's highly specialized, very few of them. However, it's not an apocalypse to everyone. This is also important to understand. To many people in the pipeline, it is the innovator's paradise, right? Our elimination is their empowerment, perhaps in their eyes, right? Like if they are a product manager, if they are an entrepreneur, and they can go directly from having an idea and designing it to using it and selling it to people, that seems very great, right? We, of course, feel like, hey, why wouldn't anyone? Doesn't everyone want to work with us? Well, I mean, I don't know. Sometimes we're very expensive and cranky. So this contention of like who wants what in the conversation also is an impasse to us understanding each other, because we can say, look, it's not going to be able to replace all of the work because you just don't understand all the things we do. There are scale and sustainability concerns and so on. And they will think you're just saying that because you want to keep your job. Well, okay, I do want my friends to keep their job, but I don't think that's the only reason we're saying what we're saying. I think there is legitimately subtlety to managing complex piles of software and a lot of unanswered questions in how machines could let people without certain skills take over that. But to argue for the devocalypse, we have to know how it would actually be brought about. So this brings us to the next scenario, which is abstraction leap. This is essentially the notion that in the same sense that we used to write assembly language, and now we write in higher level languages, that there will be another leap of a similar magnitude, such that what we now think of as source code will be somewhat of an inconvenient detail to most of the people most of the time. It would be almost as specialized as diving into LLVM bytecode or assembly or something like that. That's very interesting. How would that occur? Many people believe that we're already seeing it. It's prompts. Prompts are the new source code. LLMs are the new compilers, some say, and that's how standard source code's now like assembly languageable. Natural language becomes the artifact we maintain. Somehow it is structured somehow and tested. And the objection to this is usually, and I fall into this camp, that this is just not predictable enough to scale, that it works on small or low stakes situations. But it's not really something you can build on. Language models do not constitute an abstraction because an abstraction needs to be robust enough that you can not be constantly pulled back into implementation details. People do have other points of view. They believe that we'll be able to solve that problem. It's unclear to me how, but it's not impossible. Here is an example that seemed pretty promising from back in 2022. This is some source code from a paper called Parcel. If you go there and look up this source code, you can see 61 lines of structured prompts that have turned into an entire Lisp interpreter and about 200 lines of Python. And as you can see, in these functions are not being defined with any source code, just the description of what they do and an example of input and output. And then you see parse has a utility function that's being, kind of indented under it. And there's many levels of these indentations. That's very interesting to me, actually. It does seem like it's a legitimate attempt to make this prompts as code thing more robust, more scalable. Will we be able to actually productize this? There are a number of attempts. We'll see where that goes. I think a more plausible way we could achieve abstraction leap is with DSLs, or domain-specific languages. Now, if you're not familiar with DSLs, you probably already are familiar with them. If you've used developer-facing ones, such as SQL, such as regular expressions, and most office workers to some degree use the world's most popular DSL, which is Microsoft Excel, right? The spreadsheet is also a form of DSL. And there are many more specialized ones to particular business domains. So what this is an upfront investment in making a very specialized programming environment that makes expressing certain kinds of thoughts very efficient. And this empowers domain experts. This has kind of interesting cost trade-offs that has improved over the last 20 years with the advent of things like language workbenches, they're called, which are specialized tools for making programming environments of this kind. And there's also some call it a paradigm called language-oriented programming. These are some tools that are in that space. It's easy to imagine that language models, and there's been some work on this already, will both speed up the process of making these DSLs and also provide this automated completion for the people who are using it. This is a video on the right by me from my YouTube channel, Craft vs. Cruft, talking about why I kind of dedicated 2025 to studying DSLs on that channel. And this from on the left is a talk called Empowerment of Subject Matter Experts by Marcus Volter. And he is one of the big experts in that space, done a lot of different custom DSL implementations. So these are areas that are pretty interesting to look at now, I think. But what doesn't, that's an example with abstraction leap. It's still code under the hood, ultimately. We're still in charted waters there. The next scenario is uncharted waters. Many people believe that AI will create a future of coding that is not even code-like, actually. It's a future of computing, perhaps even without code. What does that even mean? I'm still kind of struggling with it. Some people believe that model inference, just the neural network as the execution engine instead of the CPU, will become a more prevalent model of computation. Then you have the idea maybe AI will get so sophisticated that it's inventing new programming paradigms, and we can't even conceive of it. I hear a lot of these ideas, and I guess it's just hard for me to run away with it without having a more concrete notion of what it will look like and to be able to prove it at scale. So I think it's prevalent enough we must acknowledge this point of view that the future is going to be something that's just not at all like the past. I have trouble being asked to prepare for it if we can't establish it more concretely than that. So moving back down to earth is a concept I call a review economy, which is already happening to some degree. As we are able to create more and more coding suggestions, we are now limited by our ability to validate them, right? We have agents, we have Copilot assistants pushing these suggested changes of kind of questionable validity, but lots of speed at us. And we are, in the extreme version, our job is just reduced to checking and reviewing this machine output. That's kind of a dismal future to many people. I don't think we necessarily want this. I also don't see it as an end game so much as a pit stop. I think if we wind up with anything that looks like this, we have just failed to manage our bottlenecks well. We need to be going further to the left here and figure out, okay, how can we get the system to be giving us suggestions that are right more of the time, such that we're not constrained in this way? Or maybe we need to prioritize them to be looking at the most valuable first. A pro tip here is, if you're not familiar with the body of knowledge theory of constraints, anytime your life looks like this with a big choke point, the thinking processes introduced in theory of constraints are very helpful for analyzing the situation. So finally, we have the most dismal scenario, the infinite pile of garbage, which is where AI has made it very efficient to create code of dubious quality to the point where our products get worse and worse over time instead of better. And we are ultimately just sort of crushed by this mountain of tech debt that not even the AI can help us build or dig our way back out of. There's some support for the notion that we might be heading there. For example, this is a white paper by UpLevel where they have done some controlled experiment where they've given some subsection of developers access to Copilot and seen they had a much higher bug rate and their progress through issues was relatively consistent. I mean, that would be a terrible outcome, right? Is if even the perceived productivity gain weren't there, but quality plummeted. Hopefully that's not the case, right? But that was what they saw. GetClear also has a white paper, and they did more of a metrics approach here. And in analyzing code historically, they found that 2024 in their records was the first year that there was more copy and pasted equivalent code than there was moved code. That's kind of scary if you've seen what the results of that can be. Again, there can be rebuttals that like AI coding assistants simply change the dynamic of what we should expect. Maybe the duplication's no longer so unmaintainable. I think that would need to be established for us to say it confidently. Right now, I think we just need to get to the bottom of this and figure out, does it need to continue to happen? But these are just a couple of white papers from a couple of maybe self-interested parties. Not everyone thinks that. Unsurprisingly, GitHub does not believe that GitHub Copilot decreases quality. They think it increases it. And they have this blog where they've also done an experiment, not this time on work on production code. The things, their rating of the quality improved by using Copilot. Obviously, they and maybe the others too are self-interested observers. Maybe even so am I. We need to figure out what's going on, is my takeaway here. I want to be able to come back and be citing actual papers and not just white papers, and hopefully like a meta-analysis of good research papers. If you know of some work in the space, I would love to get in touch with you. In the meantime, I think we're better off studying just past work on developer productivity than to think that we get to and code quality, to think we need to rewrite all of the rules with AI and start from no knowledge at all. People will look at these and say, okay, it's maybe producing dubious quality or more bugs now, but it will get better. I say we will need to make it better in order for it to be better. The models will have more capabilities, but we need to use them very judiciously. We need to engage in careful design. So getting to the end here, once again, the scenarios that I've identified, you might see others or want to call them different things, are extreme completion, devocalypse, also known as Innovator's Paradise, abstraction leap, uncharted waters, the review economy, an infinite pile of garbage. We won't just go to one of these places. We'll probably go to several in different ways. They interact, right? So, for instance, many people believe that extreme completion will become this sort of vibe coding revolution where it leads to the devocalypse. And others are worried that we will miss that outcome and it will drive us into infinite pile of garbage. I have expressed, like, if any of these are going to completely transform programming, it might be carefully designed abstractions in the abstraction leap scenario combined with our completion capabilities. But again, there will be multiple things that happen and they will affect different sectors of the industry differently. So someone might have a very different point of view than you and still be right within the area that they're thinking of. And we get a say in what the outcome is going to be. I don't want us to sit here and feel as though we're just waiting for a meteor to hit us. Developers are kind of uniquely positioned to be engineering our own future rather than waiting for it. So I think we need to get a clear vision of what our goals are. What do we want from software in the world? Do we want more developers? Do we want fewer? Do we want software to be of high quality, or do we just need more of it no matter what quality it is? What are we really demanding from the system? I want many things from software. I want it to work well. I want it to be valuable to its users and to the people who are building it. And I want people who work together to treat each other well. Well, thank you very much. I look forward to your questions.
Okay. Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much, Ray. I've got to say that was incredibly enjoyable. It was just really fun, just hearing you go through, all of those things, and it's definitely got me thinking about what I want. Like, I personally love the democratization of software, and so that's one of the reasons that I'm excited about a pathway we can work out to take AI to actually help with that. Like, a lot of my career has been in the world of the web. Like, I worked on Chrome and the like, and it was exciting to try and get as many people as possible actually doing development. But really interesting to think through these things. So, okay, let's get to, we don't have a lot of time, so let's jump in with a question here from David. What do you think is the single most impactful thing we can do to reach the best eventual outcome and avoid the worst?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what I spent a lot of last year doing is I briefly abandoned AI and studied formal methods for the year. I went and learned theorem provers. And then I went and worked for an AI coding agent company only after going on that side quest. Right. So basically, if I was to generalize that into advice, I mean, do learn theorem provers if you have the stomach for it. Really intriguing stuff. But just like, let's not pretend the rest of computer science doesn't exist and the rest of human understanding does not exist. Let's not use this as an excuse to not study what we already know. A lot of the problems, a lot of the gaps that LLMs leave are filled by other areas of understanding if we just let that happen. And we don't look for all of the answers within, whatever the newest brand of AI is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Oops. So One question I had is you mentioned at the beginning, and you've sprinkled in a couple of times, that you work for Open Hands, but folks may not actually know what that is and the history. I think it was Open Devon back in the day. Like, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about what Open Hands is and what you're up to there.
Yeah, and we're in this area where back in the day is a year ago. Like that's what we referred to as back in the day is amazing. Like earlier I said, back in 2022, like it was the dark ages. So yes, Cognition Labs announced Devon, a proprietary tool, in I think it was March or April of last year, and they announced it as the world's first AI software engineer, a term many of us deeply disagree with. And then, however, we were very intrigued by the kind of value proposition they had of this thing that autonomously carries out your tasks. We had been using these things where we're like kind of copying and pasting broken stuff into chat. And we recognize like, if we can just have the LLM like fight through these errors, it'll be much better. We know we can do better. So the product direction was super influential, and it kind of became this rallying cry of let's create an open source one of those. And several groups, including the people that made Swebench at Princeton, and then this group that came together with Open Hands. That was originally Open Devon. The like, can the open source community produce one of these that's competitive, that is achieving the same scores? And it did in very short order. And that ultimately became a company. And I went from cheering them on to joining them.
Nice. So a lot of the AI companies talk about, how much of the code of their product is written by their product and the like how can you share anything of how you use Open Hands to build Open Hands and how that's gone and the pros and cons and all those things?
Yeah. That could be its own interview just on that topic. But briefly, like some of our recent blog posts, if you go to all-hands.dev, actually do discuss that Open Hands is, by the numbers, the biggest contributor to its own code base currently. Albeit there's always, a developer who's prompting it, but some of them are kind of fire and forget pull requests. Like we just tag it in an issue, it comes back with something. We might tag it a few more times with things we want to change, but that's like kind of the best case scenario is when the task is carved out enough that we can do that. I also use it for investigations a lot though. Like, can you, poke around? I'm getting this error. Can you poke around and give me some ideas about why that might be happening? So there are more interactive flows as well, but it's for things that are like in editor work, we're still using, tools like Cursor, because we have kind of intentionally chosen to operate in the outer loop, the more autonomous workflows. We're not trying to be the best, development environment for coding interactively.
Got it. What about the role of tests? Sometimes I've found myself where folks have come and been like, hey, my developers don't like writing tests. So if your tool could write a lot of tests, that'd be really great. And then wait, if we have all these tests, then we can have a great, it's like, well, it's a bit of a chicken and egg there too. If the AI is writing both of these, what's your experience been around, the role of tests with AI?
So I come from a background, like my first job, I did the extreme programming methodology for 7 years, test-driven development, pair programming and everything. So I have a lot of thoughts on testing, right? I do value it heavily. I love that coding agents can help me write tests. I don't love that they don't do it unless I ask them to. I think that is in this whole space. I'm calling us all out, not any particular players. It's not going to have good results that our tools by default, when they you ask them for something, are currently most of them giving, okay, here's some untested code. The systemic result of that will be that people are writing less tests. I do love that when you choose to do the right thing, it will help you. There's also traps you can fall into of am I not writing the tests that are going to give me the best outcome? Am I just getting code coverage for its own sake? But that was kind of always here. with
Yeah.
tests. So yeah,
Yeah.
a
Have you
good
found, like,
convenience.
I found with the fix loop, it could be fascinating when I feel like it's easy for developers to just grab a stack trace, from a failed test, say, throw it in to AI and just say, fix this.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have the right system prompt around it for fixing or whatever. And then it'll come in. There was just one recently where that kind of fix was all about localization, and it would create a solution just for the Turkish language for this particular letter, and then the test pass. I mean, we're back to 100% test passing, right? Rather than actually understanding the core problem and fixing the whole core problem, right? And when go in there, you can you do this. Do you see those kind of things as well, where it, like, lots of feel good, lots of green, but not necessarily getting the level of quality?
Yeah, I mean, we see more extreme things than that. I've seen a variety of these tools. Again, this is like the coding agents in general are known to pass tests by deleting entire areas of functionality. Like, well, the thing you're asking me to execute successfully would work if I just deleted all this stuff, right? And that's not common, but it's not unheard of either. Like, if you've been around the block with these, you've probably seen that happen.
Yeah.
That's scary, but it's again, it's only scary depending on how you manage your process. Like, are you going, if you catch that in review, incredibly easy. It's the subtle bugs that I'm more worried about, but it does, it gives you an impression of the kind of leash we need to have these on right now.
That makes sense. Okay, we got time for one more question from the crowd here. Radhika saying, do you think relying on GitHub Copilot too much might make developers too dependent on AI, or does it just free up time to focus on more complex problems?
Yes. So you've heard these kinds of arguments come up with just a variety of conveniences that have happened over the years. And the criticism is right in some ways, and it misses the point in others. But I would say that pedagogy, the study of how we learn, is more complex than are we doing something that's hard or not. You do need to do things that are challenging in order to really learn about what's going on. But just looking for the things that are the most mundane pain in your rear end doesn't by itself mean you're learning the most. We need to treat learning as its first class, as a first class thing that it is.
Awesome. Ray, thank you so much. That was really thought-provoking and interesting, and really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Cheers.